The first time there was a gun to my head, it was nothing like it was on TV. You can't help but notice the reek of machine oil, the way that nothing else in the world matters right now, and right now is fucking forever. I wasn't being mugged, I hadn't rounded the corner in a high-intensity foot chase. I was tired. Salt dusted my skin from evaporated sweat, my allergies were going haywire, and I was in the most familiar place I'll ever know. I'm the youngest kid from a Norman Rockwell picture. Mom and Dad met in their college at the summer job they had. She sold balloons at Six Flags, and he walked her out to her car after shifts. If the incubatory math is any indication, they banged about once a year on around their birthdays, which were about a week apart. The three kids all share the same birth month, 36 weeks later, and 4 years apart, like clockwork. Mom held 2 careers as a nurse and a teacher, combining them in the summers as a Lamaze instructor. For insight into what being raised in a house decorated tastefully with watercolor nudes of pregnant ladies does to a child's sexual development, query any of my exes. My dad was a chemical, then computer engineer before a forced retirement from a local petroleum concern sent him back to school. In that time, he kept the household comfortable until he found an environmental engineering position. I was old enough to know that he wasn't working, but too young to understand the implications. I think that speaks volumes about the amount of effort he put into sustaining us. My sister, the middle child, rose to every challenge, got good grades, played multiple sports, and knocked out college while helping pay her way through part-time jobs. I'm the classic child of suburban white kid fuck-uppery. My upbringing was about as exotic as mayo sandwiches on white bread. I was mostly an A student at a large, moderately rural high school. I went to college, discovered drugs and sex, and promptly said, fuck it to advancement, because that shit's for suckers. My brother had his first seizure when he was 20. Epilepsy. Already a fuck-up, much like his younger brother, this personal challenge would not make socialization any simpler. It would come to define his life. As a college dropout and being unable to hold a decent job, much less quality health insurance, he would end up living long stretches of his adulthood at my parents' garage, depending on them for far longer than they had intended to support a child. Hell, they didn't even plan on having me, a fact made clear by my parents' multiple retirements. My brother is incapable of expressing his emotions or controlling them like an adult. I say this as one who can smell his own. Someone cuts me off in traffic and I'm burning down a warehouse or punching puppies in rage. I'm sure it's hard to have a disability, but Jesus fucking Christ, other people have problems too. We hate most in others what we fear in ourselves. Maybe I gave him so little slack because I knew I could do no better, that in fact I was afraid that living with this burden would have cracked me. I'm a fuck-up anyway, and I didn't have to overcome shit. For all I knew, he was a glittering example of there, but for the grace of God. Or worse, the model example of what I could only hope to achieve in his shoes. Still, fuck him. The gap in our ages did more to separate us than any amount of shared experience or activities could do to bring us closer. We worked on family vehicles together, and before his memory went to shit, he actually taught me a lot. Don't get the mistaken impression that made it any more comfortable for us to be in each other's company. I think it was June. I was home from college for the summer doing standard weekend chores with my father and brother. When I say standard, I mean standard for my household. So at ass early a.m., it's mowing, weed-eating, trimming hedges and limbs, and tilling the garden. Then it's off to special projects by noon. Dad started a lot of landscaping concepts, but rarely ever finished them. Instead, we pushed and shoved the detritus of his many campaigns around the backyard, making the piles slightly more orderly. By mid-afternoon, it was time to shift the hoarder-level stacks of crap from one spot in the garage to another. It's not that relaxing, productive labor that makes your back ache but helps you sleep and gives you some sense of accomplishment. Nope, at my house, it's grunting and arguing and putting a metric shit-ton of effort into getting nothing at all done. The garage was split between the guest house, That's where my brother is currently occupying, and the sweltering hot box full of bullshit my father could never bring himself to part with. Like any venture between my dad, my brother, and me, the afternoon and early evening went like this. My father would grunt curt and vague directives without ever telling us the end goal, and brokered zero pushback. My brother would grunt and fume and huff his frustration, and they would stand quietly until I was told to pick up something or sweep a section. They'd yell, and I pray Mom would show up and recommend that we come in for dinner. On this day, they were at particular odds. My dad's not an easy man to work with, even on his best day. He had a short temper, and a very particular image in his head of how things should happen. He shared this image through a series of grimaces and gesticulations, and fuck you for a moron if you didn't understand. I'm of the mind that he resented me for even existing, since I wasn't part of the plan, and I know that despite the love he felt for both his sons, he probably kept a fire of distaste burning for my brother as he fell before the obstacles in his life. My father had hurdled his. Those two could be in a relaxation tent on a tropical island sipping boat drinks and enjoying BJs. But the tension and aggression between them would still be palpable. It only got worse in the years my brother lived with them. I'm no better when it comes to interacting with him. I'm not in the habit of speaking ill of the dead, nor neither will I build them up with false praise. My father worked hard as fuck and I never wanted for a thing. He taught me skills I use to this day, skills that have saved my life and the lives of others. He never shied away from challenge, and he never took defeat as a reason to stop. He was strong, certain, shrewd. He loved us, and he would sacrifice himself in a moment to give even the slightest advantage in life. He was also a huge fucking asshole. Quick to anger, inept at communication, unyielding in his opinion. Never get me started on his relationship to my mother. I will talk out both sides of my face simultaneously. Now, I loved him. God helps the man that says otherwise, but sometimes I just never wanted to see him again. It's funny how one moment can be so vivid in memory, and the preceding events can remain completely occluded. For the life of me, I can't remember what the blow-up that ended our workday was about, or how we made it inside to the living room where their argument continued. I do remember my father looking ancient and weary and frail as he sat on the high-backed chair. My father is a mountain at 6'3" at deuce 80. Big is how my family does it. At 6'2", I'm the shortest man in my family. My brother is a skyscraper, but there sat my dad. Only moments ago, a tower of strength and surety, now tired of the discussion from the day's work. I stood off to his right, quiet again, a gut full of cold grease, waiting to be dismissed so I could shower and read until sleep took me. My brother stood opposite him, when something my father said blew his goddamn mind. Try as I might, I will never remember what that was. My brother took a step forward with the awkwardness of someone who has never been in a fight and stomped down on my father's knee. My dad, not in great shape for his age, and his knees worse off than the rest of him, barely made a sound. But that knee would pain him the rest of his life. My brother turned and stormed out of the room and out of the house. He stalked away fuming, his joints stiff. He bent slightly at the waist. I can remember thinking how like a child he looked as he ran off. My father turned and asked me to help him up. Back on his feet, he acted as though nothing had happened, save for favoring the other leg. He gave me some instructions about buttoning up the house for the night and turned for the hall. I heard the front door open and thunder close. My father turned as well. My brother careened back inside. You know how they say, it's never as bad as you think? That your imagination comes up with stuff way more worse than reality ever could? You ever taken that logic one step further and knowingly imagined the worst case scenario? Confident that if you were mentally prepared for that, whatever really happened would be a cakewalk. Imagine that crumbling sensation that accompanies your sandcastle dream washing away to expose a reality infinitely worse because it's in Dolby Surround and Technicolor. pressing into your stomach like a bag of flour washed down with a blacktop tar. You blink and shake your head, but the vision just won't clear. I squeezed my eyes shut for a moment and shook my head. I wasn't seeing clearly, of course. That was not my brother stalking back towards us, but my eyes were playing tricks. No way was he holding a Smith & Wesson 9mm semi-automatic. Despite my comments about the minor hoarding and the college dropout kids, we're not particularly a trashy family. Quite the contrary. Each of us is well-read, worldly, and knowledgeable. Family memberships to the museum and zoo, season tickets to the local theater, Sunday evenings at the orchestra, and a fine home in an affluent neighborhood. But there was my fucking brother walking around the house with a pistol. And there he was, pointing it square at my father's chest. Something just to the left of fear nailed me to the ground. Prickly red heat broke across my back and my whole body like a damp horse blanket. An instant glacial ice crashed upon the small of my back, sending rogue waves of chilled slurry to crest over my scalp. Fear was alien to my father. He stared, cold and calm, past the piece and into my brother's eyes. Whatever words passed between them were muffled by the static rush of blood rushing through the blood vessels behind my ears. I disassociated. I could see and hear, but nothing was really making it through the cottony cocoon my psyche had created. I have no idea what my dad said, but it was like water on a grease fire, and the gun's muzzle angled up to his face. 4 feet separated my father's brow and the matte-finished barrel. My brother was yelling something. What I did then was not a sign of courage nor obligation. I felt nothing but cold butter in my chest and buzzing in my fingers as I wedged myself between them. I put my left hand on my dad's chest and shoved gently. He swayed, his face a calm mask wrapped haphazardly around white, hot fury. I turned to face my brother, and the gun's trajectory shifted to meet my eye line. Coiled rage in my gut, rattling, hissing. The gun smelled like the head gasket my brother and I had replaced on an '82 Suburban only a week ago. In some faraway place, the ultra-logical part of my brain that so many of my friends roll their eyes and piped up just said, "A 9mm is a relatively small barrel." Shut up, Dick. His knuckles were strained and white, his forefinger switched furtively on the trigger. His stance was terrible. Elbow locked and arm fully extended. The weight had to be killing him. His arm betrayed his palsied tremor, and his shoulder hunched. The empty pseudo-calm that had filled me seemed such a counterpoint to the tension and stiffness I read all over his body. It was his face that really scared me. Screwed up like an infant about to wail, tears strewed out across his quivering cheeks. His lower lip trembled, his jaw was set with determination, but his squinted eyes were those of a child lost in a deep wood. Like a fool, I reached for the gun hand, never breaking eye contact. When he noticed, he flinched, raised the gun as if to brain me with the butt. My head tilted slightly to the left, wearing the expression of a curious dog. "No," was all I could manage. My brother's face went slack, his arm relaxed, and turned my hand palm up. He set the gun in it gingerly, as if bequeathing his original Han Solo action figure. Then he turned and left, wheeling and stumbling like a drunk, trailing sobs behind him. To his credit, my dad was smart enough not to say shit for the duration. One word at the wrong moment would have forever stained our family with blood and cordite. I stood there a long minute with my dad behind me and a gun in my hand. It was cold except for the grip, even that cooling as the tension emptied from the air. "Good night," I heard from behind me. My father's voice was a little timid for the first time in my memory. I didn't see his face. I didn't turn. I just stood there, buzzing, and muffled ocean sounds emptied out of me. It dawned on me that I was shaking, the adrenaline seeping out from my muscles, primed for I don't know what. I was no stranger to guns. I'd learned about them in Boy Scouts, for whatever that's worth. I had hoped, without even realizing it at first, that when my brother surrendered the weapon, I'd find it unloaded. But the weight told me that was a futile dream. Surely, though, he'd kept the safety on. Nope. I engaged it and injected the magazine. I held only one last hope, one last chance to forgive my brother, one day, years from now, one last concession, one last sign that he wouldn't have gone through with it. I drew back the slide and a round popped unceremoniously from the chamber. It hit the thick carpet without a sound. Before the culmination of its earthbound journey, I'd resigned myself to give the man that loaded it no quarter. Never again would I let shit slide because he had a disability or a difficult upbringing. He's used all the rope I was ever going to give him. I broke the gun down and tucked it away. I stashed it in the same childhood closet where I had bad report cards and behavioral warnings after intercepting them in the mail. It stayed there all summer. The next day, and every other day, no one said a word about what happened. Even now, when I look at my brother, all I see is a crying child waving a gun. Thank you.